Today on Startup Security Weekly, episode number 60. You can tell if I'm doing this, that means that Paul is away. Matt Alderman is joining me as the co-host, and we're going to talk about decision-making, how to audit your decision-making, sales rules you should absolutely break, how to pitch a venture capitalist, talk about the rise of pre-seed venture capital, duo security in the news, contrast security in the news, and 3 other stories that came across the wire about a couple minutes ago. Startup Security Weekly number 60 starts now.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show about security startups, how to secure your startup, and advice for security startups. It's Startup Security Weekly.
I need it from the top.
Brought to you by, make sure your team is prepared to fight off the latest cybersecurity threat. IT Pro TV is the resource to keep you and your IT team skills up to date. You can stream IT Pro TV's courses live and on demand worldwide, so there's no need to send staff to off-site training. Their team solution provides access to a supervisor portal for full control over your team's training schedule and group analytics. Go to itpro.tv/startup security and use the code SS30 to try it free for 7 days and receive 30% off your monthly membership for the lifetime of your active subscription. To learn more about IT Pro TV's team solution, sign up for a free demo of their supervisor portal. Do you have a website, an external presence, employees, an office? Any of these things can be compromised and attacked. How are you defending these assets? Have you penetration tested these public assets? Start 2017 by taking a proactive approach to securing your vulnerable areas. Black Hills Information Security has been helping companies find their weaknesses since 2008. Email consulting@blackhillsinfosec.com and see how they can help you sleep better at night. Are you looking for a career where you can make a real difference? Accenture Security is looking for passionate, creative minds to tackle some of the biggest security threats facing us today. Innovative thinkers who want to outmaneuver cybercriminals. They're hiring specialists across the spectrum, from security strategy to cyber defense, digital identity, and application security, helping to deliver holistic solutions. If you want to use next-generation technologies and global resources to change the future of security, visit accenture.com/security careers.
And episode 60, recorded live October 20th, 2017. Now, typically Paul would say at G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, but I'm in Rhode Beach. I think Matt's joining us from Colorado. So we're going to bring Matt in a second. But Paul is taking some of the advice. You know, we've talked lately about the need to take a break and to rest, and Paul is taking us up on that today. So we do try to practice what we preach here. And before I bring Matt in, let me give you a couple announcements. Security Weekly's got an upcoming webcast with Signal Sciences, Thursday, November 2nd, 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Join Paul, Joff Thayer, Zane Lackey for an application security discussion. Zane will share practical lessons learned during his tenure at Etsy on the most effective application security techniques. Go register today, securityweekly.com/Signal Sciences, and you'll be all set for that. Now, tomorrow is Providence HackCon. That's going to be at Roger Williams University in Providence. It's an event co-hosted by Roger Williams University, the Providence Public Library, and Security Weekly. And I know a lot of folks from our crew are going to be there. And if you're going to be there, they're going to be excited to see you. It's been designed to introduce high school students currently participating in a Cyber Patriot program to an industry-style conference in a safe environment. Speakers are going to include Ben Jackson, Ron and Cindy Gula, and more. It's not too late to register. Go to securityweekly.com/ProvHackCon, P-R-O-V, ProvHackCon. Go to itpro.tv/startupsecurity. Use the code SS30. Try it free for 7 days. Receive 30% off your monthly membership for the lifetime of your active subscription. Now, when you're there, you can learn about IT Pro TV's team solution, and you can get a free demo of their supervisor portal. And over the last couple of weeks, we actually talked with the crew at IT Pro TV, learned a little bit more about how this works and how it benefits you. I think you're going to love it when you go check it out. And Paul's Kung Fu Webcast. We've talked about this. And you got to love that picture. Paul's going to be hosting a webcast this coming Wednesday, October 25th, 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern Time. You've heard us talk about his talk that he calls Everything I Need to Know About Security I Learned from Watching Kung Fu Movies. And if you haven't caught it at DerbyCon, DEF CON, or one of the other places he's delivered it, this is your chance. You can register for this one at securityweekly.com/kung fu. And I made it through. It's kind of like all the time it took Paul to figure out how to say Santa Arcangelo. I guess we've got that set. I need no help on Matt Alderman. He is our security consultant, the wizard of entrepreneurship, strategic advisor at AutoMox and others. Matt, welcome back in the co-host chair. Always good to see you.
Always great to be here. Yeah, I always get your name mixed up too, so I'm sure I've slaughtered it a couple times. So sorry.
I think it's just I hope we're at the place where we just go, Michael Sin. Oh yeah, I know him. Yeah.
The only way I can remember it, by the way, is I have to say Santa, because otherwise I want to say Sancartangelo instead of anyways, Santa. It's easier that way.
Well, and the funny part is Santa Arcangelo, people always want to add an H into it, and classical Italian spelling does not have an H. And Santa Arcangelo, Holy Archangel. So it's a name I will never live up to, but it's fun to have. So I like it. I hope the kids like it. Plus, by kindergarten, I knew most of the alphabet, at least half of it.
Yeah, right.
We're going to do stuff a little differently this time. We're going to try to get our interview on, but we're having some challenges reaching them. Sometimes that happens on the program. And of course, always like that. The good news is Matt and I never have things to talk about. So Matt and I never have things not to talk about. We're going to do our typical, we've got a couple articles that look at the world of the startup and innovation and take a look at our industry and the way those things are going. And then some pretty interesting stories this week that Matt will take a look into. Tomas, again, I think I've said this enough now. We're going to have to go get Tomas on the program for an interview. It's going to be fun. So he's a venture capitalist. He's at Redpoint. And the stuff he's putting out there, when I read it, I can tell he's been through, he's figured some of this out. And one of the things he talked about, we put up this week, is decision-making auditing. And I loved it, where he said, how do you help someone when that person knows substantially more about the question than you do? And, he said this is a lot about management. I'm going to argue it's more about leadership than management, but that's just esoterica. What we start talking about is you're going to come across people who know a lot. And part of the reason that Matt and I talk a lot about, what problem are you trying to solve? What value are you bringing, right? And we ask those types of questions is to figure that type of stuff out. But the other part to this is, well, how do you know? Like, how are you auditing? How do you take a look at these things? And I happen to like about this. And he says one of these things is the most wonderful thing about this style is that it retains the emotional ownership of the decision with the question asker. The two hardest parts of it are fighting the impulse to answer with an opinion and structuring the questions properly. So the idea is, basically, instead of just answering it, like you start going through it, like you're auditing your own decision-making process. It's a very high level of self-awareness. Like I liked it, and Matt, I'm kind of curious what you think on this. The way I look at it, and I don't want to get too confusing. I've actually got a concept I introduced when I wrote Into the Breach, so going on a decade now, called the human paradox gap. And it was all taking a look at how a lot of times when we make decisions, we don't actually think about consequences. We don't actually think about expected or unexpected outcomes. And then we're quick to just subjectively label something as good or bad. And what I started doing is breaking it down. And I said, actually, you have a decision or you have an action. And then what happens is there's an outcome or there's a consequence to that. And it could be intended or unintended. But then there's an impact. And the impact it could be positive, negative, or it could be neutral. Not a big deal. And what I always like to give as an example is penicillin. Penicillin was an accident. It was some moldy bread left in a bag. I mean, by today's standards, we should be tossing them out and talking about how he wasted a perfectly good Petri dish and smashing stuff and screaming at the top of our lungs. But he looked at it and went, that's kind of interesting. Look at how it's killing that stuff. How'd that work? And boom, we got penicillin. The point that I usually make is you have to just go look at your decisions. It's not that it's good or bad. It's just, did you get what you expected? Did you get the outcome? What did you learn in the process? And sometimes then by asking those questions, you learn about it. And then I think what Tomas is pointing out is that if you get comfortable doing that to yourself, you can do that for other people in a way that allows them to keep ownership of it, but helps them learn and you learn in the process. What are your thoughts? Because Matt, I know you ask a lot of questions. You're advising people when you go in. How do you use this, and what did you take out of his approach?
Yeah, I mean, for me, this is an important part, right? You have founders that have a vision, or at least an initial vision, and sometimes it moves, right? As you start developing a product, you start going out and talk to customers, things move. Where I think I provide value in the conversation is going through the questions. I have a series of questions I ask every single client when I walk in, when I help them identify their value and their power positions. And it's the same one. And I ask it to all the executive team, not because I'm debating whether what they're doing is right or wrong. I'm trying to extract out of each of the executives' brains their specific spin on it, and then trying to pull all that data together. And it's a form of this auditing piece, right? Is where if you're asking the right questions, you're getting a set of answers, can you then reassemble all those pieces into something that everybody goes, yeah, that's it, right? That's what we thought, but yeah, that's it, right? That builds that messaging framework foundation that we've talked about so much. And then you can align all the executives on it. Look, the CEO is the one who has to believe in it and then foster that through the organization, but you've got to get all the executives on board. And so I like this type of process of asking questions, not because I'm developing their message, I'm just helping extract it and structure it in a way that you can now visualize it, and people are like, that's it. That's exactly what we think we do. Okay, good. Now we can move forward.
And what I love about that is as soon as you structure it, now you can go back and audit it. So if something shifts later, you say, hold on though. Remember when we did that first talk or when we had that meeting, we asked these questions, this is what we came to, and this is why. Now you tell me something different. Okay, what changed? Sometimes the answer is something substantial and material changed, and it's great. They captured it. Sometimes they go, oh, I don't know. Those are usually more troubling to me, and that's where I like the auditing part to it. I'll give you another example. A lot of times, and just to be clear, I don't do this to be a jerk to people, and I don't do it to be pedantic either. I'm genuinely curious when I ask this question. But as a speaker, I've been to a number of events where somebody gets an award for some project. So they sit down, and a lot of times they're at the speaker's table, and so I'll say, hey, congratulations. By the way, what was it like when you were getting buy-in for that project? What was the problem you were trying to solve, and what kind of value did you expect from it? I mean, these aren't new questions I've been asking. I've been doing this my whole career. And they'll fumble through something, and I'll say, okay, did you get it? Like, did you achieve that? And they'll say, well, I just won an award for it. I said, I know, congratulations. But did you get what you expected? Like when you sat down and you told us the problem you're going to solve, you built the business case for it, you got everybody excited about it. Now you've gone out, here it is a year, 2 years later. Did it end up the way you expected? By the way, if they say yes, then something didn't go right, because I have never in my entire life had a project that went as expected. But it doesn't mean you didn't get the value you wanted or you didn't get to the particular outcomes. I think I could probably count on one hand the number of people I've asked that question of in the last 10 to 15 years that could actually answer it. Most people look at me and go, that's a really good question. I don't know. So what I would say is if you're in a startup today, you need to know how you make decisions, and you got to go back and look at some of the decisions, because in the process, you'll learn. In the process, you have the potential to learn and make better decisions. But I think it matters in any part of the security industry today. There's an outcome, but then I'm always curious how someone got to that outcome. And so, I don't know. I think it makes a difference.
Yeah, to your point, right? Look, once you set the framework, people look at it and they're like, okay, good, let's go. They'll start to drift almost instantly. And then you got to pull them back and go, but no, this is why we made this decision. I'm not saying that once you do it once, you're done. This is a process you have to go through every 12, 18 months as your product evolves, as the market evolves, as the customers evolve. It changes. So don't think you're going to do this once and like, okay, that's it, I'm done. No, I mean, this is an iterative process. And so once you get the executives aligned, I always like to go out and then validate it with either their advisors or existing customers and go, wait, guys, does this resonate or not? Because if it doesn't, that's the time to start to make some of those tweaks and then, roll that out. And so I always try to go through a validation process externally, but I don't do it up front. I want internal to set it. Then I want to use external to validate it. If you bring customers and advisors in too early, it just muddies the waters, in my opinion, and makes it harder to get to that core message. Then I'll go out and validate it. But it's ongoing, so don't think you're going to do this and stop. Profile.
Yeah. You ask too many people, and you try to be something for everybody, which means you're going to be nothing for anybody, and that makes a lot of sense. All right, so you and I both spent time around marketing and sales. Top 10 sales rules you should break. I like anything that puts these things up, and I like to just kind of take them down. Some of these are interesting. First one, do whatever you need to do to close a deal. I think this would be a great thing to break, but I'll tell you what. I see a number of places where a company will say, "Oh, we don't do that. We have very set limits." And then the person who's winning salesperson of the quarter every quarter is the one doing whatever they can to do the deal. They're going out for the nice dinners. They're sending tickets to the show. They're doing all type of stuff. What's your take on this? Is it a do everything you can because people are so busy you need to stay top of mind, or if we're a better fit and we're communicating our value better, should that get us the type of results we want?
Yeah, well, tied back to the other one, right? If you understand the problem, you have value, you're differentiated or better, you don't necessarily need to do this. I'm a big believer that, look, people buy from people they trust, which
Yep.
means trust and the establishment of trust, being very just open and honest. Look, here's where we are with the product. Here's where we're going. Yeah, we've got a couple gaps, but we think we're doing this better than anybody else. I'm a true believer in transparency. Not everybody believes that. I get it, right? Because look, they're compensated, they're coin operated. Salespeople are coin operated. They're paid to get a deal closed, and some people will do whatever it takes. I've seen lots of good reps in my career that really valued the relationship, never wanted to burn the bridge with the customer, wouldn't do some of these things that in this list because there's a number of them. So I don't think you do, but I know the pressure from a lot of organizations is to do whatever it takes to get the deal closed.
I think it's a really key point, right? It's the organization will say one thing and then it pressures something else, and that puts our reps into a tough spot. And by the way, when you're in a startup, a lot of times like, I got to get a deal. Every deal counts, and I think you got to be really careful because, as Matt just pointed out, if you try to talk to too many people and you end up with a Franken profile or a Franken product, it doesn't always get where you want to go. And I think, let me tag on this because you just brought up the trustworthiness. The one that really stood out to me that I liked, number 3, never admit a weakness in your solution. They're saying throw that out. I agree. Look, you can't be everything to everybody. And when somebody talks to me, oh, we can do that and we can do that and we can do that. Okay, did you understand what I was asking you, or B, really? I'm struggling with that. I don't have a problem with somebody talking to me about the challenges or not. And I can tell you, when we look at the startup side, talk about the number of large enterprises. These are household names. They're the ones that now have startup funds, or this is their R&D. Security is important to them. They're working on some pretty cool challenges in industry, sometimes stuff that we've covered. And I've had some of them sit down with me and say, Michael, you're not going to believe this, but these startups sit across the table from us. They can't tell me what they're good at. They can't tell me what they're not good at. They won't tell me what their limitations are. They don't know what they want. I don't know how to work with them. Like, why would you take a meeting with me if you can't answer any of those questions? But the thing that really stood out to him was, if you can't do something, just tell me, because I might have a solution for it, or I might know how to handle it, and I don't really care that you can't do it. I just want to know where your limits are. I think that is so much. I think it's understated. I think it's really important. And you were just talking about that. You and I are on the same page. I like transparency. If you can't do it, you can't do it. But can you imagine lying to somebody, telling them you can do it, and then showing up and it doesn't work? I mean, I've been in that situation where somebody's lied a lot, and it's horrible because you got to try to figure out what to do about it. Your thoughts on this? I think you should just be upfront with what you got. And I'm
absolutely.
Look, the same way. Yeah.
It's highly unlikely a startup is going to walk into a Fortune 500 account, get a PO without a POC. So if you're setting expectations and you go into the POC and you can't deliver, guess what? You're not getting the PO. You just shot your whole chance in that account. So if you're not open and upfront to say, look, this is what we can do, this is where we can't do it, maybe we can do it in the future, you better be clear up front, because you're going to go through proof of concept and they're going to test the product left and right. And if you can't meet the requirements that you set out, that you said you could, you probably just blew your shot in that account. So yeah, I'm a big believer in just being transparent.
And keep in mind too, in our industry, people talk. So if you piss off somebody because you lied, they're going to go tell 3 or 4 other people what a horrible experience it was, and that's going to make it a lot tougher for you. Other ones in this I thought were kind of interesting. You know, if you call 100 people, you'll connect with many. Just get referrals. Start doing, like don't do texting, but do social media. I think a lot of these things roll up, and I'm going to just take my take on it, and I'm kind of curious your take on it, but I look at it, and as I've gone to some folks that really understand sales, it's interesting, and we see this in all industries. There's a number of people that have built really good careers in terms of being, sales speakers. They're motivational speakers. They rally the troops and everything. And I've gone to some of them and I say, hey, what are the fundamentals of sales? And they look at me and they go, I don't know. I have no idea. And that's always troubled me. But over the last couple of years, I've met some folks. I've talked about Anthony Iannarillo. He wrote The Only Sales Guide You Ever Need. Great book, good guy. I've talked to him a couple of times. Really enjoy his approach to stuff. And what he's helped me understand is and you already said this, Matt, you're selling to somebody that you trust. It's about a connection. It's about a relationship. So, the way I always look at it is, if the person that you want to work, I have some clients that like to text. Guess what? I text. I have some clients that prefer phone calls. Okay, we talk on the phone. I use Slack, right? You and I talk about Slack all the time. I use Slack with some of my clients. I kind of use whatever the client likes in order to make it work. But I find a lot of times it's down to just making these things work. So, do I need to dial and call 100 people? I find sometimes that's actually a really good strategy, because I think it terrifies us. But long run, or this just get referrals. I can tell you, referrals sounds great, and it's really hard to come by, because when you're getting a referral, you're counting on somebody understanding your value and expressing it the way you would to somebody that may or may not have that problem, or may not have that same understanding. So when I look at a lot of these rules and how to figure it all out, I think the answer to a lot of this is, stop. Just be a person that talks to another person, have value, have confidence that you can deliver value to solve the problem. And if they don't have the problem, take them at face value and move on. And if they have the problem, see if you can help them solve it. I think it kind of boils down a little simple. I probably oversimplified it, but what's your take?
I like number 9, because you partially said it, right? Number 9 to me was the one here. The prospect should tell you what they need. No. You better have an understanding of what you think the problem is. To me, sales enablement here, in understanding the market and the technology challenges, how you solve it, you need to have that base understanding, because when you go in, you can't just ask the customer, hey, what are all your problems, man? You've got to have an idea of, look, if you're doing this, here's the challenges we think you have. Here's how we solve them. Can you validate some of this for us? There has to be some level of understanding of the problem and the solution. So number 9 was the one that I thought was really interesting here. The other ones, look, everybody communicates differently. I'm an old school guy. I still, there's certain technologies I still don't use at my age. I probably should, but I just don't. But you've got to be flexible with
Says
what your
the guy who understands
use.
Docker and microservices. I just want to point
true.
out.
It just doesn't mean that I
there.
use some of this stuff, right? I mean, come on, I'm barely on my Twitter account. I use LinkedIn, but I don't even have a Facebook account, right? I mean, there's certain things I haven't come to deal with yet in my career. So you got to be flexible. Sometimes it's the phone, sometimes it's email. It's okay. But 9, I like 9. 9 was a good one.
Yeah. Now, have you heard? And this might take us a little bit afield, but it's the same thing. Have you heard of the concept of the challenger sale? I mean, you've been around, so
yeah, of course, yeah. Yeah,
so it's
challenger sale, force management. There's a few of them out there. I know I've seen most of them through my various stints at companies.
Do you like the idea then of challenging stuff? So the way you and I tend to talk about things is have a strong point of view, understand the problem, understand the industry, understand where you fit, and then you can elevate people. So you're going to come across people, right? The way I like to put it a lot of times is they may or may not understand the problem as well as you, but they might know that they have it. And so you can almost give them a lens or a way to think about it different. And I think if you've done that, you've imparted value from the first touch. But some of these other approaches they say, look, they can't possibly know, and you've got to challenge them. You've got to tell them. You've got to don't be the no, we can do that. No, whatever you want. Yeah, you take the opposite kind of approach to it. Do you like that style? I mean, I know it's just more of a personal thing.
To me, I think you have to have a base understanding of the problem and be able to challenge customers. And the reason I say that in some respects is a lot of the startups that I'm working for, look, we take a lot of stuff for granted, both on the technology side and the security side. We keep doing the same old stuff we've been doing for 15, 20 years in this space, and the market's moving. So I think it is okay to challenge with a core kind of foundational understanding of based on your solutions, how are you different and better, right? And so I think you can challenge in that particular case. I don't think you can walk in and say, look, I can do everything for you, because that's just not realistic.
Yeah.
But in a very focused area where you understand your value, you can, I think, and should challenge a little bit to kind of extract that out. Because look, there's a ton of FUD out there in a lot of different market segments. And if you're not willing to say, look, Here's why I think we're different and push back a little bit. You're not going to build that respect and that relationship to win the deal anyways. So I've both force management and the challenger sale both do this to an extent. But it's understanding your value. It's understanding the buyer and their challenges and being able to articulate that, I think, is an important thing to have.
I like it. All right, so you've got a background in this, and I'm so glad you're on the program when I happened to grab this one. So this on marketing profs. They've been around a long time, pretty well respected. So the question I ask is B2B marketing and sales messaging improving? By the way, the answer is 51% of respondents say B2B marketing and sales communication has improved over the past few years.
Yeah.
So that's
Wow.
a majority. 24% say it's gotten worse, and 25% say they've stayed the same. And when the people say it's improved, they say it's more relevant, it's geared towards my role, it's delivered in a timely manner. And so people tend to like that. But then the things that frustrate people, and I got to tell you, let's take this first part. I think this is, I signed up for something today, so I know my mailbox is now going to get flooded, but it actually said to me, okay, where are you? Have you already done this, or have you done this, or have you done this, right? So people are segmenting their list better. And I think if you look at a lot of the marketing automation software that's out there, it's actually, I think, overwhelming, but we can do a better job of trying to understand, okay, I'm trying to work with security leaders, which might include CISOs and directors and VPs, and they have these types of challenges. So I'm going to go right for them as opposed to just blanket right for stuff. And I think what we've seen in this whole idea of content marketing over the last decade is know who your audience is, right for your audience. And it sounds like that might be getting a little bit better. Do you agree, and would you attribute that to the trend for it? Because I feel like we read articles about that pretty much every day.
Yeah, pretty much, right? Well, part of this is, look, we're getting better educated as marketing folks to say, look, you need to understand who your buyer persona is, right? Now, I think some places go like buyer persona wacko and with too many, but you have to understand your base audience or who the potential buyers are. And if you craft your conversation roadmaps correctly, then your message to them is much more targeted. So this doesn't surprise me because we've been doing this. And let's see, I started doing this at RSA and some of the training stuff that we did back in 12, 13, right? So it's been 4, 5 years in this respect. So that's good. It's finally, moving through organizations, which means we're getting more targeted because we're understanding our buyer personas. So part of this doesn't surprise me at all because I think as marketing or marketers, we're doing a better job of this now because we've been educating ourselves over the last few years. Some of the other ones, though, were very interesting on the other side. So I'll wait until you read those off.
Well, yeah, and I was going to say, like, if we look at what the top not improved, it looks like spam or a canned message, and I have to tell you that kind of now that drives me crazy. But I'm going to point out the counter side of this too. Some of the messages now are almost, they feel like too personalized. So some of the advice people will give now is if you're trying to write to one person, just sit down and you're writing to Michael, you're writing to Matt, and write it that way. And they have the field variable where it's my first name, my first name, my first name, my first name. Oh, please stop. We're not best buddies. Like that's not the message I want. And so sometimes it almost feels like they're trying to make it too personal. And then, the spam message is like, to whom it may concern, I have this thing, you're going to really like it. Just keep reading the rest of the 1,000 words in this message, and you'll maybe find value from it. I think that's probably a pretty big challenge still. Why do you think that's a challenge? Is it that companies just don't invest in it? Is it that it's hard to get that balance right? Where's the challenge in that?
I think part of this is the pressure for lead generation in general, right? You have organizations like give me leads, and you start building campaigns and you're pushing out lots of stuff. I do believe in much more targeted campaigns, again, aligned back to your power positions, your values, the buyer personas. So I like things more targeted, but you still have a lot of lead generation that is just a shotgun approach. It's just throw stuff out, hope that somebody visits your website, hope that you can convert them into a marketing qualified lead to hand to sales, right? I don't believe in that approach, which is why I'm very particular when are we ready to drive campaigns. So I think that's part of it. but there's big pressure for lead generation. There always has been. Sales wants more leads at the top of the funnel to drive through, and without a well-crafted kind of campaign strategy, this is what you get. And that's why I think you see a lot of these kind of like pre-canned spam things, because they're just shooting at whatever is out there,
firing it out. Yeah,
Yep.
I'm with you. I'd rather be more particular. All right, so the other piece is, what frustrates you the most when you receive a bad phone call? Number 1, callers have failed to do basic research about my company before calling. By the way, that's one of my biggest concerns too, and complaints when I get some of these messages. I mean, I appreciate if you're going to send me a message on LinkedIn, or I appreciate you're going to send me an email, but it's not hard to figure out. I'm not an 100-person company. I work with enterprises, but that doesn't make me an enterprise person. And some of these pitches just don't fit. They just don't make any sense at all. And that's a quick way to get deleted. I don't really pick up the phone if I don't know who you are, so I don't take a lot of these calls, but it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, but I mean, you have to understand, again, it's back to, you better understand who your buyer is. And if you don't understand this, then you're not doing the basics.
Yeah, I think that's a take, but a lot of times, especially in security, we're quick to point out the negative to it. We're quick to point out, oh, it's horrible. Oh, and I don't like this. Oh, and I don't like this. And it's kind of like, okay. And what I like about this is actually the majority say, yeah, we're getting better. And I think that bodes well. And I then think that means that's an opportunity. If you take what Matt and I just broke down, and you're a vendor, or you're a startup, or since I'm starting to do, and Matt, you and I haven't really had a chance to talk about this, it's interesting. A lot of the stuff that you and I talk about, I'm finding there's a really strong enterprise pull right now to say, okay, we need to do this internally. How do we do it internally? And that's, by the way, that's great. These are the lessons. Take the time to figure out the problem. Take the time to have an opinion on it. Take the time to figure out who your customer, your consumer is, or who it is you're working with. Figure out what they need to know, and then communicate that to them at the time and in a place that they find appropriate. And guess what? They're going to like it better because that's helpful. And as you've pointed out, if the pressure is get something done, get me some leads, where was this done? Where are the leads? Yeah, it's Glengarry Glen Ross, funny movie, but didn't get us where we go. What's your take? I don't mean this to be so broad, but one of the things Paul and I have been talking about, and I know Jack Daniel's done a lot of work around looking at burnout in our industry and looking at the mental health of stuff. And one of the things that I've started to notice more is hopefully we're taking some of the stigma, not this program per se, but just as an industry, of saying it's okay if you're depressed. And sometimes, like I'll tell you from my own experience, sometimes it's hard to tell, especially if you have like a high functioning sort of depression. And there's a bunch of other stuff around it. And so I put this article in because I thought it's important for a couple of reasons. One, I like this idea of putting stuff out there around this. Two, if you're a startup, I think this gives you an opportunity. I mean, a lot of startups, right, they try to compete on different things. We give you unlimited vacation, which is sometimes a double-edged sword. We have cool ping pongs. We do free lunch Fridays, all that type of stuff. And what's interesting on this is they started looking at there was a recent survey, and they looked at it, and they said, okay, did you try to find somebody to help you with whatever your mental health concerns were? And people said, well, actually, it was kind of a distraction. I couldn't really do it on the job. And my employee stuff really didn't help me, and I didn't know how to go about it. And so the point of this is you can actually help your employees, right? And I think the argument here is if you have employees that are happy, that are, well, let's start with healthy, that feel mentally healthy, that are vibrant, they're better off. I mean, we've looked at wellness programs for probably 20 years now, and in every single case, you can show that they work. I was driving back from a thing in Atlanta last week, and it was a huge manufacturing plant, and there were people basically doing laps out in the front yard. You could tell there was part of a wellness plan. But you know what? People were walking, they were talking. You could tell they were joking. That's awesome. Like that, what a great thing to do. And what they basically said here is, look, this whole run and gun, hey, look, we've got healthcare and, good luck. The argument I think here is maybe you can stipulate it better or clarify it, make it easier for people to get some of these things, try to take some of that stigma away. I thought it was an interesting take. I actually have a background in healthcare policy, so I'm not sure exactly where I sit on it, but what do you think of this, Matt? Is this the kind of thing that would create better workplaces? And if you were a startup, would this maybe attract people that wanted to have a slightly better balance of their life?
Maybe. To me, it all boils down to the culture that a company wants to put in place, right? If they're encouraging people to go out at lunch and walk around the parking lot, or doing some of these things, to me, it's all culture related, right? And every CEO is going to instill a culture, good, bad, or ugly. It's true, right? And I look, there's a lot of organizations I've worked with have had really good cultures, really encourage the employees to go out and do things together. Look, I think that goes towards your mental health potentially more than some of these programs. I get it. People get depressed.
I agree with that.
And go through these times in their lives. Everybody has it. But look, I want to work for a company that enjoys being together, that are doing things that continue to contribute to that mental health. And when cultures go toxic, people leave. It's just a fact, right? People don't want to continue to be burned out and treated poorly. They'll start interviewing. There's plenty of jobs out there in this industry. And if you've got a really bad culture and people are getting depressed, guess what? They're going to start interviewing. They're going to look to leave. And so these programs will help. Don't get me wrong. I think it all boils down to culture and how do you want to treat your employees, and how do you want to be remembered as a leader when the company is successful. But to me, that's more important, actually.
I like it. Actually, I like everything you said. All right, last part: how to pitch a venture capitalist. Well, I mean, why build on perfection, right, Matt? All right, so look, we throw these things out. When we got started, Paul and I spent more time talking about how to pitch people. And I just want to point something out that's really interesting, at least from my perspective. Pitching a venture capitalist is absolutely different than pitching a prospect or a potential client, which is different than pitching a partner, which is different than pitching somebody to come and join your startup. And a lot of people think, I got a pitch deck. And it's kind of unfocused because they're not exactly sure who they're pitching or why. So I threw this up because it came out of PitchBook, and they cover private equity. I think they cover private equity really well as VC and M&A stuff. So they're one of the sources where I get to pull a lot of stuff, and I think they do a really nice job. And so they had a sit down recently, and they basically said, okay, well, we sat down and we said, all right, let's go talk to the VC and see what they had to say. I don't think you're going to find a lot of surprises in this, but I bring these types of things up again just to reinforce some of this, so that if you're in that position, if you're testing out a startup, and a lot of you have written in to the program, or you've reached out to me or to Paul and you've said, hey, thank you. We're testing it out. We've still got our day jobs, but we know that the way that we're going to do better in security as an industry and better in security as a community is if some of us figure out how to create solutions that scale. And that's awesome. And that's what we want to hear more of. And some of you, in order to really start to achieve that and to break out of your day jobs, you're going to have to get some investment. And that's why we talk about getting to your first couple sales, getting to your first couple $1,000s, just getting somebody to pay you and then to build on it and to build that up. So first thing is to do your research. Now, we just got done saying the biggest challenge when you're B2B marketing is they don't know who they're talking to. I think the same thing applies here. The question that they have here that I really liked was, quote, who are the smart people that can help me and my company? I think that is so important, because a lot of people are like, well, I want to check, right? No. I mean, we covered pro rata, I think it was last week, and we talked about how if somebody has a pro rata clause, they can keep their proportion of ownership and they can keep their board seat. If you don't like them and they don't end up liking you, that is not a good strategy for anybody. So know what you, right, but doesn't this, Matt, at some level come back to know what you need, right? So if you're going to do your research, it's got to be like right back to the things you and I talk about. Know the problem, know your perspective on the problem, know the venture capitalists that are investing in that space. Now, do you think it should always be, when you're doing that research, are you looking for somebody who's in that space, or how would you advise a firm when they're doing that research? Do they need to be narrow and just go to one of the companies that's already investing in security? Should they look at an industry? What's some of the research things that you think someone should think about as they're getting themselves prepared and thinking about who can help them?
Yeah, there's a number of things. Look, there are some really good funds that are very focused on security. And I like a number of those funds because they understand the market in general. But then you've got a lot of other VC firms out there. And I think the point here, and we've talked about this before, is you better know who your VC is and what their track record has been, and what does that mean for you as a founding CEO? For example, look, Sequoia and Greylock and Bain and all these guys are great, but they want to build unicorns. And when you build a unicorn, you have to be ready to go after lots of funding rounds, C, D, E rounds.
Yeah.
That puts a lot of pressure on a CEO to continue to go out and raise money, right? So just remember that when you're out looking, say, hey, I want a Sequoia-backed company. Sequoia to back me. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Depends on what do you want to do with the company. And then there's lots of other firms out there that look, they don't want to build unicorns. They want to build companies that become strategic acquisitions. So part of the research is to understand the firms and what they've done, and so you understand what you're walking into when you go to not only pitch these guys, but when they come back with a term sheet to go, okay, we're going to get money. And there's one down here later that I'm a big believer in, only take what you need. Part of that ties into this research, right? So I like that doing that research. You have to understand, have they funded something in your space or one of your competitors? Because look, they're not going to do two, right? So if you're in the container security space, for example, because that's one that's near and dear to my heart and that we're in the middle of right now, look, Sequoia's already backed StackRox, and you can go through. They're not going to invest in another container security company. So you have to do the research to understand, do they have one of my competitors? Because if they do, they're not going to invest in you. So you can start to weed them out. All that kind of research is going to be important.
Well, let me extend that for a second.
Potentially pitch for.
Because I know when I talk to a lot of the firms or a lot of these funds, they'll say, we want to get the best. Everybody wants to back the winner. They want to back the racehorse. So if Catalyst is already behind somebody, or Sequoia is already behind somebody, or somebody else is behind somebody, does that then mean that when one of these big names has thrown maybe a big round, right? It's an $8 million A, it's a $10 million A, and you're out there pitching, do you then have to, when you're doing your research and understanding who you're going after, do you then have to explain to them why either you're really the better bet than they are, or why, yeah, look, they're going to try to be a unicorn. We're going to be a better return because we're looking for strategic acquisition and we've got good partnerships. Does that, when you start seeing that your space is getting funded, does that, when you're doing your research, does that change your pitch?
Yeah, it has to. You have to know it, right? You have to know that you've got major investors in, and they're going to say, well, wait, there's already 3 of your competitors are already highly funded. Why should I fund you? Right? You have to have an answer to that. I'm telling you right now, because you've got to be able to walk in and say, look, yeah, they're funded, but their approach is this. Ours is this. This is a better way to do it. You know, this is why we think you should make the investment. You absolutely have to know that. You've got to do the digging on your competitors. I mean, you have to understand all that going into this.
So then that also changes. So let's go back to your point of only take what you need. And you and Paul and I have talked about this a number of times. I see some of these valuations, and it just feels like somebody's ego got involved. And admittedly, sometimes too, it's more people barge into the round because they want to be in it, and the founders don't know how to say no, or they don't want to say no, and so they end up with wacky valuations and all sorts of stuff on it. But on this theme that we're on, so if you start seeing that your competitors are getting funded and they're getting big rounds, does that necessarily change then what you need because the landscape has changed? So like, it's not changing it because now you've got to put up a big number like theirs, but if they're putting up those kind of numbers, then your marketing messages are going to have to change. Your Salesforce approach is going to have to change. And so, you know, same thing then when you're doing your research and you're watching those rounds, you've got to watch those rounds to look at what they're getting valued at. You've got to try to understand that space. And then when you're going to that VE or whoever you're looking at from an investment perspective, you pretty much have to explain to them why your ask is going to counter those market forces, as well as develop your product or platform or strategy or whatever else, right? So what
Absolutely.
you need
yeah.
shifts. Yeah.
Yes. And look, I'm like I said, I'm in the middle of this right now, and so again, I'm a big believer. You take what you need, you prove it out, and then you go get another round if you need another round. But there is pressure to take a bigger A because your competitors took bigger A's. It is there. I trust me, it's there. But you've got to be cognizant that if you take that big round, expectations shift, and sometimes having the money puts pressure on you to spend it in ways that you would normally not do it. I'd rather run a tighter ship. I'd rather run a more profitable business at the end of the day than to do something crazy. And I think some of these really big early rounds have forced some of these companies to do some crazy stuff. And I'm not a big believer in that. So I would even go in and say, look, somebody took 20 million, but I only need 8. It's okay. I can execute on 8. And here's how I'm going to execute it. This is my plan. And based on the revenue that we think we're going to get, based on where we are with deals, here's how our cash burn is going to be. I don't need more than 8. Let's go, right? But there is pressure even from the other firms to say, yeah, but your competitors took 20. Yeah, but they haven't delivered yet. What means
Right.
they're going to deliver with the extra money? Here's our plan to execute. So you've got to be prepared to have that conversation because it will come up. Because they're coming up in conversations I'm having with some of my advisory clients right now, is they want them to take a little more. But I keep telling the guys, I'm like, do we really need to take more? Only take what we need, prove success. If we need more after that, then a Series B is easier to go get. So I'm a big believer in right sizing an A.
I think you're pointing out something that's interesting, and it's two things that I've seen is that people are reluctant to do it. And I tend to see people take too much, not too little, right? Because if you take too little, but you've got some of your fundamentals right, or you're showing progress, you can get more money. Now we see companies, if you take way too little and you're not strategic at all. So first part of my question to you then is the consensus over the last couple of years has been each of the rounds should get you through 2 years, right? So if you're seed, I should be able to get to market and show some level of traction. And there's always a debate on what level that is, whether it's paying customers or whether it's number of people using it or whatever else. And I think it depends a little bit on the industry. And then when you're in your early stage rounds, your A/B, you're trying to get your unit economics right. You're trying to get your product market fit right. You're trying to demonstrate it. And then by the time you get to your C and later rounds, it's all about growth. It's all about growth.
Mm-hmm.
And then either, looking for whatever your exit is. Is it still 2 years then? Is that still the guidance? Like when you're talking to people and you're looking at it, are you trying to help them look out, not at just this year, but what's going to get you through 2 years so that you're ready to make that next raise?
Yeah, I calculate
Or is that
everything
changing?
Some people, I always calculate on a 2-year burn rate. Is what I've been working on, right? Is assume a 2-year run rate. And so you have to look at your burn rate for 2 years with your revenue balance and mix and what you think you can actually do. And that should help you identify the right size. So I still use 24 months to do it. I still think it's the right number. I think some people are shortening that down to 18 months in certain scenarios. But again, I'd want 2 years of runway before I needed to go to another round. That's still the number for me.
Well, and I think what you just pointed out too is that let's say you plan on 24, but somebody comes along at 18 or things take off or you ignite. I find you can always get more money, but I think too is and the advice on this is take what you need. You've got to be wary of the valuations. Yeah, if you take a bigger round, your post money tends to be a higher valuation, which then means the bar you've got to clear to get to your next round just got bigger, and that's not always as achievable as everybody likes. So I like your example. Everybody else took a 20. Cool. I need an 8. I can execute on 8. And if we need more, we'll go get more. But my fundamentals will be better. I'm not going to be distracted. We're going to be better focused. I'm going to get you better results. I think if you've got the evidence behind it, that's a really cool thing. I think the last part, and this seems like stuff you and I keep talking about, but it's tell your own story. I'll tell you though, Matt, and you've probably come across the same. Have people that are like, well, do you know so-and-so? Well, we're like them, but different. Whoa, you just started out talking about your competitor. That's nuts. Like that's crazy. Tell me your story. Tell me who you've worked with. Tell me your point of view. Do you think people skip this, or is it, you and I spend so much time with it. Does this just come easier to us, and so we're so excited about it? Or why do you think people sometimes skip this one?
Yeah, so I think it does come a little more natively to us because we talk about this a lot and we do this a lot. You have to have your own point of view. To me, the base questions you have to know walking into a VC meeting is, what's the problem? Simply, what is the problem? And what's your point of view in solving that? And then ultimately market size and some other stuff. But if you can't answer those 2 basic questions and you walk in and go, look, we're just like so-and-so, but we do it in the cloud. really? Is that
Yeah.
it? So
So when they do it in the cloud, what happens to you?
right, exactly. That's exactly right. And so that's the way you're going to come across. Oh, well, so therefore if so and so just builds a cloud solution, nobody needs your solution. So why would I invest in it? That's a wrong way to start a meeting, right? So again, understand the problem, your point of view. Why are you better or different than your competition? And then, to me, then what comes out of that is what do you believe your value, your core strengths are as part of your solutions? Those are the basics to me. And if you don't know those walking into a venture pitch, you're toast.
Yeah, and I think their point here too, and it goes to everything else you and I just talked about in terms of marketing and sales. Frankly, I think it goes to hiring. I think it goes to the way you run your security team if you're in an enterprise today. Don't try to tell everybody else what they want to hear. That just gets tiring, and that creates so much friction. And if it doesn't seem like it's real or authentic, I don't know. I tune out. I think a lot of other people do too. Your point is, if you understand your story, you've got your point of view, you can connect those dots. Then do that. And the real investors, that they want to see that you've got that passion or that obsession, that you've got that knowledge that they can trust their money with you. Just turning into a yes person and giving them whatever you think they want. I'd be shocked if that actually works, because I can't see too many places where it will. Any final thoughts on pitching venture capitalist?
No, this was good. The next article's a fun one too, because it's the step before the VC. So we should get to that one.
Well, and it's starting to change a little bit. All right, so startup. So we're going to shift startup and security news you need to know. And it's I love the fact that Matt's here, because Matt looks at a lot of this stuff and he's got those hands-on experiences. So what we've been doing, Matt, and as you keep joining me on these, I'm trying to find, and to be fair, a couple of folks have done it. Crunchbase is doing some of these. Axios is doing some of these, and they're putting out these articles to say, here, let me go explain to you how the funding is working. And I think it's important. It's important, clearly, if you're a startup to get a better sense of how it works. But I think it's just as important if you're in the enterprise and you're an enterprise leader and you're looking to work with these startups, because understanding where they're at, understanding where they need to be at with run rate or burn rate, and understanding how their performance may impact whether they stick around or not, helps you figure out how you can better support them and give them the traction they need or get what you want to solve a problem. So there's this new concept of the pre-seed venture capital. And one of the things we've talked about is that seed rounds, there was a time, and this is not the not distant future, or past rather, not distant past, a seed round was a couple $100,000. And that would get you to a Series A that was maybe 750 million. It was like, if you had a $2 or $3 million A round, that was like, wow, that's huge. Now we're routinely seeing A rounds in the 8 to 10 to 12 to $14 million range, which feels crazy to me. And so what they're basically saying is, yeah, so what we used to call seed rounds are now A rounds, and pre-seed is the old seed, and so it's all just kind of changing. And I think part of this is money's looking for where to go, right? And so I maybe don't back as many companies, I'll back less, but I'll give them more money because I've either done more diligence or less diligence or whatnot. So when you look at this and you look at this idea now of pre-seed, and one of the things you start to see is some of these funds, or we see directed funds, where they'll give them a little bit less. They tend to have pro rata rights in there. So if you do well, they can get in on those later rounds and maybe even have first right at those rounds. Where do you see this idea then of pre-seed venture capital coming in?
This one gets really interesting really fast, right? Because the seed round used to be friends and family, right? So you go out to people, they want to make some investment. That used to be your seed round, and it was maybe $500,000, right, on average, and it got you bootstrapped and got you started, and then you go out for an A. Well, yeah, you're right. Everything's starting to shift. So is a pre-seed really friends and family round now, and a seed is when VCs come in? But this article says, no. There's firms out there that will pre-seed, and I know a few pre-seed guys, right? Ron Gula was doing a lot of this, and I think is still doing it with Gula Tech Adventures, right? Where he would, come in kind of at a really early pre-seed or seed stage into some of these companies that he wanted to make some investments in, because that's what he wanted to. That was kind of his investment, limits at that time. And I know he's done more since then, but he was a great source for some of these companies to come in and get those early rounds, but still almost like a friends and family round early on. Now it's more formalized with what Ron and Cindy are doing. And those are great to kind of bootstrap a company, start to get some momentum, and then go after an A, right? Because look, the guidelines for an A it depends on which VC firm you talk to, but look, they're going to want to see, revenue, typically roughly $1 million annually. Customers will depend on the size of the customer. Look, if you're $1 million company and you're selling to 2 to 3 enterprises, you'll probably get an A round. If you're in the mid-market, they're going to want to see more customer traction, even though your revenue run rates might be at $1 million, just because it's a little harder, right? It's all scale. That used to be the numbers, and if those keep going backwards, the question is, what happens in these pre-seed and seed rounds going forward? I still like A's smaller, but you're right. We've seen a ton of big A's above 10 million, and I think it puts companies in a very interesting quandary, because their valuations now are so high that strategic acquisitions are almost out of the question at an A round, which means you can almost bet your bottom dollar they're going to B. Okay. So if
they fail faster, right? Or they don't continue. That's the flip side to this. Is what we're kind of doing. I mean, there was an article in the Wall Street Journal today. I didn't include it because Wall Street Journal is behind a paywall, but I can give everybody the thumbnail sketch to it. And it basically said, we've got a lot of tech unicorns and they're probably overpriced. And as a result, some of that money is going to compress, and there's going to be a bunch of corrections. And their argument was, that's okay. That's the way it's supposed to work. They had an interesting sub-component to this, though. They said, and I don't remember the number offhand. Maybe you do, Matt. SoftBank's what, $93 billion, right? Is that what the SoftBank fund is?
It's close to $100 billion. Yeah, close to $100 billion.
It's crazy. And so for them to get any kind of return, they got to start funding it. So what they said is, you're going to start watching them do these huge debt rounds and these huge late stage rounds to keep people to delay their IPOs. And the corollary was, that's going to really screw up the markets, because the markets need to sort some of this stuff out. And I think what you're describing in this too is it's the same thing. Like, I'm like you. I like a smaller seed round. Get gritty, get focused, right? Because I think you raised something that I don't think a lot of people think about. You take a bigger round. At any stage, you take a bigger round than you need, there's going to be pressure to spend it, and you're going to be distracted. And then it's, well, I've got money, I guess I can go do that. No. Get focused, everybody. Do what you do. Execute on that ruthlessly, and then prove that you can do those different types of things. And, I'll be fair, for me, that was a lesson that has taken me, 12, 13 years to figure out. And now that I've figured it out, wow. I wish I had listened to everybody 12 to 15 years ago. But so what I think is interesting here then is that if you're in the investment side, what they're saying is, okay, the A space is crowded. And as you just said, the size of these A's, strategic acquisitions, I mean, you've got to be really good now to get acquired. And we don't see a ton of people acquired out of an A unless it's the undisclosed, which is the acqui-hire, which means you didn't get your B round. You had something that was novel. You probably pooched the valuation, and so now someone's essentially going to hire you and your team, and you're probably not going to
take your intellectual property. We call those fire sales, by the way.
Yeah, and that's what it is.
It's basically it's an exit. It's a down round fire sale exit, because you can't get the B, because you didn't execute when you had the A. That's why if you take too much A, it puts so much more pressure on you as a startup.
So then do you think that this pre-seed round, so if we look at it from one side, the pre-seed round then, so if I'm on the hunt for money, right, I've got to either look for these unicorns, and I know it's gonna be a long, and I'm going to do subsequent rounds, or I'm going to look for more of the strategic M&A. I'm going to look for the people that are going to look to get acquired, but that are smart and they're disciplined and they know what they're doing. But because there's so much, what are there? The last count was 2,000, 2,500 seed or later stage funded companies that we're tracking right now in the security space. I think in the U.S. alone, that might be a worldwide number. But anyway, that's astronomical. So if you're trying to get an investment, if you're trying to figure out the space, look, it's confusing for us here. It's confusing in the enterprise. It's confusing on the money side. So what they're saying is, fine, I'll push earlier. Screw the seed round. We'll go to pre-seed, because they want to be in. They want to try to figure it out. And that's a smaller bet, because, hey, go back to writing a $500,000 check is a lot better than writing a $10 million check. And you can write more of those checks, and somebody's bound to, right? It goes back to the old, I know half are going to fail. I know one is going to be my superstar, and 2 or 3 are going to give me 2 to 3x. Okay, cool. right? And so somebody's
Right.
going to give me 5x in 5 years. If I get that, awesome. And if they're 10x, woo, that's my jackpot. That's my racehorse. Let's do it. So do you think then that as we see this on the money side kind of shift, that the advice for startups is resist, 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 don't take it if you don't need it? Or does this open it up? Is this going to have the other effect? It's going to let more companies try it out. And yeah, more are going to fail. But that's okay. Like, is this a correction in the way that the marketplace is operating, or is this just going to make things a little more complicated for the foreseeable future?
I think I don't know that this solves the problem. I think a correction solves the problem, right? There's a lot of money sitting on the side. Private equity firms are trying to figure out what to do with their cash. Trust me, there's a bubble here somewhere that ultimately has to be burst. What it does do, though, I think, is allow smaller companies to do some innovation without taking a lot of risk, not too much risk. Risk on both sides, right? Everything's a risk-reward balance at the end of the day, both for the founder and for whoever funds them. And so this allows you to try more, see what sticks in a market that continues to move, continues to need to innovate. We all know we're still fighting, the attacks, and we're not there as an industry. So this allows some innovation to continue to happen without a lot of risk for both the founder and the funding side, and then allows you to prove. At the end of the day, it's all about getting traction. You've got to get customers, you've got to get revenue. And the sooner you can do it, the better. And look, Nirvana is you do a seed round and you don't need an A round because you've got enough traction, you got enough revenue, you can bootstrap the thing yourself. You probably need an A round somewhere.
Yeah.
Oh,
do you have an example?
Look, Tenable was the perfect example of this. Look, Tenable didn't take an A round until 10, 11 years in from Excel.
Yeah.
They bootstrapped the entire company from day one. Okay. There are companies that can do it. I think it's harder, though, to do it now than it was back when Tenable did this years ago. And that is because there is so much money coming in, both at seed and A rounds, that it puts a tremendous amount of pressure on the organization to hire out sales and marketing to continue the growth once you start getting market traction. So I think it's really hard to do it.
Well, yeah, because you and I both see this all the time. So you know what happens there. You're a small team. You got your message figured out. Now you got your big round. And boom, look at all the people in marketing. And boom, look at all the people in sales. And guess what happens? Your 3-month sales cycle is now 12 months. You know why? Nobody understands the point of view the way you did. Nobody understands how to express that value the way you did. And it all, there you go. It all slows down. So that's good stuff. All right, so let's talk about money. Duo Security, $70 million Series D, which puts them at a $1.7 billion post-money valuation, another unicorn in the world of information security. They've taken $119 million over 6 rounds since 2010. In 2015, they had a Series C, $30 million. Once you're a unicorn, your acquisition options are kind of not really there, right? I mean, so what? Now they're on a IPO path?
I think so. I had heard some rumors at one point that there was a potential interest in acquiring Duo. And this round shows me that probably is not going to happen, which means, I think the only exit now is an IPO. Unless somebody big is willing to come in at that's $1 billion valuation. That's huge, right? So that probably means IPO. I think, but there were some. I had heard some rumors that people were looking at them for a potential acquisition. But after you take this kind of round, I'm not sure an acquisition is.
Yeah,
is the
your
future.
number of suitors got really small. Yeah, that's really small. There's a couple of companies that can still do it. So then I always look at it and I go, so IPO. I'm not saying this in a way that I don't agree with it, but an IPO for a company that's made its bones on authentication. That makes sense?
MFA.
Or is this
multi-factor authentication? Well, look, Okta did it, right? Come on, it's possible.
No, it's a fair point. Okay, it's a fair point. Well, but then, so I guess what we're gonna have to start watching now is does this new round of money, does this valuation, do they start expanding? And let's go see how they do it, right? Because as you've pointed out a couple times, they had a category, they're the category king. It's probably time for them now to start shifting that category a little bit I'll be curious to see kind of where they go and how else they evolve. Or I guess maybe not, right? Maybe you could just do one thing and be freaking awesome at it and displace everybody else and just crush it. I think it's going to be interesting as we take a look at it. Yeah. Contrast Security, $30 million Series C. So they're $54 million over 3 rounds. Yeah, this is their growth round. And they took their Series B was 2016, $16 million. So, numbers wise, this seems okay. What's interesting about Contrast is this is what they pull off of Owler. They develop a security technology that enables applications to protect against cyber attacks. And before we had some other stuff come across the wire that I want to make sure we get to, they're basically saying, okay, it's self-protecting software. Look, I'll tell you, their website's a little busy for me. And when I look at it and I go, okay, this is where do you put them? Like if we categorize them in one of our quadrants or anybody else's, self-protecting software. So they're not like in part of that new thing we're figuring out with like RASP and everything else.
They are. Actually, they are.
Okay.
Yeah. So let me break this down for you. They originally were an IAST, an interactive application security testing tool. Took that technology and started to build a RASP, a runtime application self-protection product. So they're where most of the money has gone, based on what I've heard and seen, is really building out the RASP capabilities. And they have a pretty broad RASP. The thing for me is, you guys know, gosh, I sound like I'm beating the drum over and over and over again some days, but sorry, is look, application self-protection is interesting. Container self-protection is even more interesting because the modern app is moving to containers. And so, look, this market's shifting. Even the RASP vendors, I have to start understanding containers. I know Contrast is doing some stuff here on the container side with their RASP product. But so look, there's a bunch of new
some time there.
Yeah, and then there's a bunch of new container security companies that will compete with some of the RASPs in some of the things that they do, but then I think they're going to be at a very different level and potentially have more viability than the RASP. That's just my take. So we'll see what they do with the money, but they've been going after the RASP market pretty heavily lately.
Do you like this round? Do you like?
Yeah, I mean, for them, I think it's about right. Knowing where they were with the products, what they did, Series B was really to build out the RASP capabilities. So this means they're going after the growth round. This probably makes sense. And look, there's still a lot of legacy applications out there that have to be managed. We'll see what they do on the container side. Do they do it better or different than some of the others? I think time will tell, but I think they can get some traction in RASP for the legacy stuff, and this is their growth round to go do it.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch, and you've got me completely turned on to containers now, so I'll pay attention to there. All right, so 3 that came across the wire that you caught. Resolver acquires Risk Vision.
Yeah, this is an interesting one because look, my first startup was a GRC product, and I competed with Agilliance, now Risk Vision, along with Archer and a number of these other ones. And so this is an interesting acquisition because you have basically Resolver, which is also really a GRC product. They rebranded themselves to an integrated risk management because that's what Gartner's calling it now. But what you have here is a GRC basically buying a GRC. And so I thought it was just an interesting acquisition for one of the early GRC vendors in the space to get acquired by another GRC company. I'm still waiting to see how this is going to play out because I think they have some overlapping capabilities in the portfolio. I've done a ton of advisory calls on the GRC market space. There's definitely people looking at some movement in this space. This is not what I expected, though. There's a couple other things I'm expecting in the GRC space. I was not expecting Agilliance to be scooped up by Resolver. So that's why it intrigued me. It's an exit for an early GRC vendor that's been around probably for a dozen plus years. But it's just one of those areas that I continue to track. And I was like, ooh, a GRC bought a GRC. What? I didn't see that.
So is it like a consolidation though? Like given your interest in the space, I mean, is it just like to stay competitive now, you've got to get a little bit bigger, and if there's enough overlap and or the areas that you don't overlap or complementary enough, like we're going to start to see some consolidation in this space, you think?
Yeah. Well, I think that's where some of the other advisory calls have been going. Not necessarily consolidation, but expansion of the GRC platforms a little bit.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, because look, GRC it's a big market scope, but it's also a mile wide and an inch deep functionality wise. And so I think one of the challenges everybody's trying to figure out is how do the GRCs expand and go a little deeper into some of the areas. So having a mile wide, inch deep, by another mile wide, inch deep probably wasn't what I was expecting. I was looking for some consolidation of some deeper technologies tied with GRCs to provide a much deeper platform across the governance, risk management, compliance space. I wasn't expecting this one.
Good point. All right, Fidelis acquires Topspin, and you pointed out.
Yeah.
We just talked about the big round that TiVo got, and now here Topspin just got acquired. So what's your read on this?
Yeah, so this is interesting because look, TiVo just got a nice round. They're doing really, really well. Elusive is actually struggling and kind of pulled back a little bit. So we've seen news on both sides, kind of positive and negative for the deception space. And now you have this acquisition. I looked at the numbers. This could be a really good thing. $3 million in revenue, according to Owler, $7 million in. With the right purchase, those numbers work. Let me just do the quick math. Let's assume, look, no terms disclosed. So here's what my assumption of a good acquisition looks like. $3 million in revenue, 10x return on revenue, $30 million. That's a little over a 4x on investment. That would be positive for everybody in the mix. Anything lower than that, obviously, is maybe not so good. It'll be interesting to see what kind of additional news follows on from this, because I've seen deception's hot, but outside of a TiVo, I didn't know who was doing really, really well in the space. Maybe Topspin was doing something really good, and Fidelis saw the opportunity to pick them up. Maybe it's a fire sale. I don't know. I can't tell from the.
Well, and you know what's always interesting too, because you and I look at this, like, so take something like UBA, and we go, okay, is that a standalone or is that a feature? And I think, well, I've come to the conclusion so far that that's a feature. So anybody who's doing UBA right now standalone, they're going to get consumed in. And so we may find that deception may not end up being a standalone. Deception may end up being a feature. And that what happened here is that Fidelis might have seen that. They might have made a really convincing argument to say, come join us now, right? And to your point, didn't want to disclose the terms because they didn't want to influence valuations or have it deconstructed because of the valuation, have anybody read into it. But they, we might actually take them at their word and to say, we liked the way this fit. We liked the vision, and our option was go do our own or buy them. And we found terms that worked out for them and for us and for everybody else. And without knowing the people involved, what I can tell you is, and you and I both come across folks like this, they want to do their own thing, but it's not that they want to do their own thing as much as they want to go solve this really cool problem and kick ass at it. And then one day they go, what the hell? I own this company. I don't want, what did I get myself into? And then they have a couple options. And one is they go find something where they can still do what they want to go do. And somebody else is going to go do the selling and the marketing and that management crap that they don't want to deal with. And then other times it's just they're struggling. Like they maybe didn't get it completely figured out. Somebody saw some vision in it and they could salvage it and go. Do you read into when terms are undisclosed as that's probably not good? Or do you think some people just don't talk about it?
Typically it's, we don't want to disclose, it's not good.
That's how
some companies just don't. Yeah. And that's why undisclosed rounds are always questionable, whether it was positive or negative. I think the thing to take away from here is, if I'm a startup, look, a 3 million revenue run with a 7 million, basically full funded round, those numbers can work for strategic acquisition. It's when you take 14 million and you're sitting at $1 million in revenue, when that kind of announcement's like, that wasn't good, right? I'm just, you got to do some level of multiplication here. And when you do it, you go, wait, this could have been a good exit. They didn't disclose the terms, so you don't know for sure, but it could have been because the numbers are roughly right. That's when you think about what a good exit looks like.
Yeah, and let's be fair too. If you're Fidelis, depending on what you see as next moves, I might not want to disclose my cash position. I might not want to disclose a number of things. So it might be an advantage for them not to. All right, last part, because this is, I know you've been waiting for this. This is you're excited. So the headline. In fact, you know what? This is your part. You run with it, Matt.
Yeah. So articles came out. DockerCon EU was going on over in Copenhagen this week, and there was a number of announcements, but most of them were like, partnerships and new product releases, which is what startups do. It's a typical place to do it. But the news article that came out for me is surprise announcement changes container landscape at DockerCon EU. And really what's here is, look, Docker's realized Kubernetes is a force in the container orchestration space. And they said, look, we're going to play nice. We're going to start to support Kubernetes going forward. And look, we talked about the Kubernetes announcements about a month ago. IBM, VMware, Oracle have all been making huge announcements on leveraging Kubernetes. And now Docker says, okay, I need to go along. This is huge news to me in the container space because, look, Kubernetes is getting traction. This market's going to continue to evolve. It's one of the hottest spaces, both on the DevOps application side as well as where's security going to go in the future. So I like to track news like this, and this is a pretty big announcement in this space.
So I don't track this as closely as you, so I might have misunderstood some of this. But by embracing their rival and taking a look at the orchestration elements to it, does that create then the de facto standard?
Almost. It's so close. I mean, look, Kubernetes is all the rage on the strategy calls I sit on, at the announcements from the big companies a month ago, Docker's announcement. Look, Kubernetes is basically won this space. I mean, I wouldn't say that it's a slam dunk, but this means that Docker is going to continue to drive innovation on the containerization side and some of the other things. Maybe the platform isn't as important. I don't know, but I mean, this to me, this is really solidifying Kubernetes as the de facto kind of platform for orchestration for containers moving forward. And I think look, it came out of Google. It's got a huge community behind it. I think this is a good thing as we look at container and container adoption for the future.
Yeah, I like it, and I'll throw out this analogy, and I'm curious what you think of it. But I was kind of taking a sprinkler system at the house we're at, needed some work on it. And what I thought was interesting was that you could use like 2, 3, 4 different brands in it. So your sprinkler head broke and you're using Toro, but all you have is a Rainbird. Fine, use the Rainbird. Or you really like the Rainbird controller, but you like the Toro sprinkler heads. And I said to the guy something like, how does that work out? And he said, well, it used to be different. It used to be they ran at different voltages and they were different sizes and none of it was standardized. And they all realized that that was not working for any of them. And it was creating people didn't want to put in a sprinkler system. And when they kind of standardized on here's what a sprinkler head size needs to be, and here's how they function, and here's their basic signals and controls, and here's the standard voltage they're all going to work on, and here's how it works, you can mix and match anything you want. And now you just got to compete on quality or price or feature set, but not on some of those basics, like in this case, like an orchestration or whatever else. And I've often thought, without going much deeper into it, that sounds like a pretty cool model. Like at some point, I'd like to have time to go really understand how that came about, because I think a lot of times in security, our challenge isn't so much in the how we can communicate or fit into these different places. It's got to be more on, but do you do that part of it better? Are you a higher quality? Are you a better fit? Do you give me a better feature set? Are you a better price or whatnot? Is this kind of moving in that kind of a direction? I don't mean to simplify containers and Docker and Kubernetes down to a sprinkler system, but does this kind of move us closer to where some of the plumbing now and some of the feature sets are a little bit more compatible? So now I can focus on whether something actually meets my needs or not?
Yeah, I think so, right? In every technology market kind of goes through this, right? You have open source and you have proprietary, and then they start to come together, and the next thing you know, we have interchangeability in the ecosystem. And I think that's what you're starting to see with this one, is that whether you run Docker Swarm or Kubernetes for orchestration, they're all going to leverage the same core Docker containers on top. And it allows for customers for that portability. It helps with, I think, continued adoption of the container ecosystem. You see variations of this across the board, but I think this is good for the industry because it starts to build that kind of standard underlying plumbing, foundational stuff to say, okay, look, I'm using Docker containers, but I can now pick my orchestration systems. I'll pick what's best for me and not run into, look, at the end of the day, I think Docker wants to be the container engine itself. And so as long as they keep the Docker container engine, what the orchestration platform maybe is not as important. So again, I think it's smart, and I think it's good for the industry as we continue to move through this.
Yeah, it strikes me as mature, right, Matt? Like this is somebody saying, okay, we know what we want, right? They understand the problem, they understand where they want to be, and these other things that are distractions, fine, embrace them, make it like it seems like it's a surprise, but it seems like it's a brilliant move to me. And with that, we just wrapped up a brilliant Startup Security Weekly with Matt as the co-host. Hopefully, Paul had a nice, relaxing day and restoring some of his mental health. And we'll be back next week with more fantastic insights on Startup Security Weekly. Have a great week.